Yo, everybody, welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you once again by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the writer of comics like the Eisner-nominated Crowded, Trustfall, and the upcoming Test. It's Christopher Sebela. Thanks for coming on, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
So I just have to start by, I mean, normally I would ask somebody like how their weekend is going because, you know, it's the weekend when we're chatting. But you are now taking weekends off. I gotta talk about that. Like, why is that a thing you're doing, and how's that going? Is that like super? I don't know. Is it good for you as a writer to have some time away from actually writing?
Yeah. And it's not like I'm doing anything magical with it. I'm not like,
Printing 3D printing boxes for that say hijinks on them.
I'm doing that constantly anyway.
Sure.
So, I'm just like, I don't know. I hit a serious point of burnout at the end of last year where I always tend to hit sort of a burnout stage around November. I'm not sure why, but every November would come up and I would just be like, I'm just going to like play a really long video game for this entire month, and like I'll hit any deadlines I have, but I'm not going to do anything outside of that. And that was fine. And then at the end of last year, I just kind of like, I think collapsed a little bit. It was just I went really hard in 2018, and I think something finally had to give. So for my own just like mental health and trying to actually enjoy the rewards of this of writing, other than just having books. Like, it also pays for me to stay alive.
Right.
So, I'm just trying to like embrace that more. And like, I don't know, because, I've been freelancing for 13 years and you just get to a point where weekends don't mean anything anymore.
Right.
You still kind of feel it in your bones because you spent all those years going to school where they taught you, and at regular day jobs. So you still have the anticipation of the weekend, but then the weekend comes up and it's like, now there's just like more people outside, but I still have to do all my work.
Yeah. The tricky thing about not having weekends is it's like you don't have that break to give your brain a little bit of time to kind of like, I don't know, get back together. Like that's one of my problems is because I have a day job and I have Monday through Friday, but then basically a lot of the other time I'm spending it like, podcasting, or I'm writing and doing other things. And so it's like, I have to find time for myself to get a little break, because otherwise it's just like everything starts feeling like a job and I don't have any break to kind of get myself back together. So that's really good that you found some time for yourself. But how does that impact your schedule? Does that like make your Monday through Fridays like a little bit more intense, or not really?
Yeah. Not tremendously. Right now I'm juggling 3 books, which is not as tricky as it sounds.
Sure.
There were times last year where I was, juggling like 6 books. So this feels kind of breezy in comparison. It's mostly just about trying to, this goes hand in hand with trying to figure out this whole time management thing. And it's a process. It's an ongoing process. So some weeks I do just as fine as I did before I worked through the weekends, and some weeks I just tank. And I'm not like 100% pure on the weekends either. Like before I was talking to you, I was sort of goofing around with the interior front cover of Crowded number 8. So like I'm still doing some work, but there's the pressure isn't on there. It's not like I haven't set this goal for myself of like, well, I'm going to have this script done by Sunday evening. Now it's like, well, I got a couple pages done because I felt like it, and that feels good. So it's a bonus now instead of beating myself up because I didn't hit a deadline.
I was going to say, like, maybe because you're choosing to do that as opposed to having to do that, maybe that kind of reframes it as like something you kind of have fun with.
Yeah. I mean, it's all, I don't know. The last few years have just kind of been a grand experiment with my life and figuring out like what works and what doesn't. And it just keeps proceeding. So this is just a new wrinkle where I'm trying to actually uh, focus on myself
Yeah.
as much as I do on my work.
Yeah. Well, tying into that, I actually did want to ask about, I don't want to go too deep into Zola because we get plenty of quality Zola action on Twitter right now.
Sure.
Zola's your dog. But I think one of the things that people forget about comic creators and pretty much anybody who like writes or draws for a living is quite often they're spending like the entire day in the house by themselves.
Hmm.
And it can be really tough because it's just like when you're left to your own devices, like sometimes you just get like trapped in your thoughts and all kinds of things like that. But one of the amazing things about dogs is they need to be walked all the time. And I have to imagine that gets you out of the house a lot more than you would in the past. Like, do you feel like that element has been good for you? Because I feel like that's a very complimentary thing to the taking weekends off. Like it might even be a good mental health thing just to get out of the house for a bit.
Yeah, for sure. Like, having a dog is a lot more responsibility than I anticipated.
Sure.
I mean, I knew it was a lot of responsibility, but like once the dog is in your house and it's like, ah, shit, now I have to figure out vet visits and I have to budget for heartworm pills and so yeah, it's made things more complicated on that end, but like the very simple fact of like every morning and every evening I have to walk the dog is nice. It gives me a bit of structure that I just honestly didn't have before. Because when you set your own schedule and your own framework, it's very easy to just not to just kind of let it be loosey goosey, and then you run into the problem of everything bleeding into each other. So now I have this living reminder who's like, hey, I need to go out, so you need to stop working. And yeah, it's nice, like just getting to like walk around my neighborhood and see places around my neighborhood I've never seen before. Like it's everything about it is great. Like I have some complaints, but it's a dog, so like dogs are gonna chase things. So I can't complain too much about it.
Is this squirrel related?
Squirrels and cats.
Oh,
Like it's squirrels during the day, but then like last night we went out for a walk and literally we walked by 5 yards and each yard had a black cat in it.
oh man, that feels
And
like an
Zola
omen.
was yeah, but Zola was like freaking out because I think to her she's like, why is this cat like just to her it's just the same cat, I think, and it just keeps like getting ahead of us. So yeah, that's like it's difficult because she wants to chase. I just don't know what she'll do with it whenever
Yeah,
she catches an animal. So I don't want to find out either.
no, I definitely would not want to either, especially if it's my cat. As a cat owner, I'm like alarmed for that. Well, one black cat or five black cats, depending on which one it actually is. But is this your first adult pet?
No, I mean I've had cats,
Oh, okay.
but cats are a whole different bag of responsibilities. And they're a lot more low key in terms of like, you get a cat and it's just like, okay, well, here's where you poop and I'll make sure to feed you every day. Uh, I don't know, like dogs just feel more intense.
Sure.
And dogs are just like more about you. Uh, Cats are just kind of on their own trip and your trip and their trip happens to intersect occasionally. But Zola is just like super about me and wants to just hang out all the time or
Yeah.
be around me. And so, yeah, it's a lot more intense.
Yeah. No, I mean that is. I mean, obviously that ranges animal to animal, but for me, like actually, we were talking about this before. I have two cats. My problem is my cats normally want to be wherever I am, and so when I'm writing, it's like I'll have one trying to walk on my keyboard, and the other one will be like literally draped around my neck. So like a lot of my articles are written like that. With having Zola being all about you, like how does that affect your writing? Do you have to go out of the house, or is it just like I don't know, you're just getting used to it?
You just adapt. Yeah. I do go right at the coffee shop at least once a day, or I try to. So I
Yeah.
just leave her here for a couple hours. But like once it's not like she's a very sleepy dog. So like she'll be very about me, but then 10 minutes later she'll be passed out and snoring. So
It's such a good
it's not
life.
Yeah. It's not a huge detriment to, there are way bigger detriment. The fact that like I do most of my writing like sitting on my living room floor with my back against the couch, like is a much bigger problem than my dog like harassing me.
Sure. Well, I want to, before we get into your work, I want to ask actually a couple of questions about something that involves the buildup of your work. And you have notebooks. Like you have these varying notebooks you put ideas into. You have like, near as I can tell, you have kind of like series Bibles of sort, like one of which was your crowded one, which I believe you lost, right?
I thought I lost it.
You found it
Oh yeah, no, yeah, I thought I lost it. Ironically, on a trip
to see
to
Rebel
L.A.
Wilson.
And then I came back, and the next time I sat down to write Crowded, I couldn't find it. Um, and then I mean, it was like 2 months later. I had just kind of resigned myself to like, well, that's gone. Like I wrote to the Burbank airport and filed a report and sent them photos of it. I wrote to the airline. And then one day I just like I pushed the couch out and it had fallen where it hadn't fallen to the floor, and it was sort of,
Oh,
so it was behind the couch, but it wasn't on the floor because I had looked under the couch. But yeah, so I found it again, which was a very like I was having dreams about it. About it's it felt like losing my diary, honestly. So yeah, I tried to shake it off, but I just couldn't. So luckily, now I just put my name and phone number in all my notebooks.
yeah. I mean, that definitely seems like a good idea, but at the same time, it's just like, I don't know. I mean, I'm very curious about that process because like it's it seems like I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm just generally interested in it because it's from what I understand, you basically have these as like Bibles for each of your individual projects, and I know that you kind of have. I think you had kind of like code names for some of them for a bit when you were actually building them up. But why is that a method that you employ, and like what is it about like kind of handwriting things into a notebook that helps you out as part of your process?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I think I originally started doing it because I think I got it from Matt Fraction. I think I noticed he just had a simple like composition notebook. And he and I are both like big notebook nerds. Like we would like tip each other off about like these notebooks that we used to obsess over at Barnes and Noble. But I would always get so I would buy these things and then I'd get so precious about them that I'd never use them.
Hmm.
So once I saw the comp notebook, I was like, oh, okay, that makes a lot, like I can do whatever with that. I mean, the thing about it is like, it's completely different than writing a script. Like, so much of writing the script is just sitting in front of your computer and typing. And like, if you remove yourself from that completely, um, you, you're just one, you're operating on a different headspace. Two, um, I don't know. There's just something about writing things down, like the time it takes to do that. You, that's enough time for an idea to generate off of the idea that you're writing down. Like it's hard to explain really, but like I think the preciousness of it, and I am very guilty of wanting my notebooks to like look good in a certain way. So I'm
Sure.
very like so my marginalia is all very neat and like boxy, and I don't know. There's something about it just helps my brain think about this stuff on a where I'm not forcing myself to be like, okay, now what happens? Like it takes that element away where I'm thinking about it, but I'm not thinking about it, and that's where some of the best stuff comes from, I guess, or it has so far.
So are these notebooks mostly like ideas, like broader ideas, or is it like do you get into nitty gritty details at all?
Oh no, they're all like, yeah, like when I start a notebook, I will write down every idea I have about the book and where, scenes I think would be cool. I do world building, I do character building, like all the building blocks are in the notebook. And once I have it down enough that I think I understand it, that's when I move over to start typing. But yeah, it's sort of a thing I impose on myself that like I'm not allowed to move over to typing until like I've at least like I can like sometimes I'll make myself rewrite out like outlines and stuff to make sure that I know it
Mm.
forward and backward and that there's nothing wrong with it that's jumping out. So it's really like my each notebook is like a laboratory for that book and where I'm just putting everything in and seeing what works and what doesn't and it's nice to have a physical object at the end of the book that I can put on a separate shelf and like, you know, here's the diary of when I worked on this book, and here is where, you know, this idea came from, etc. Not that I've gone back and looked at them, but I have them if I want to.
It would be interesting to compare the diary with like the finished product and see like how much different it became over the process. But I do, you know, for me, I have a whole lot of notebooks, which foolishly almost all of them are just kind of generic and black looking. So like they are completely interchangeable, which makes me spend a lot of time figuring out which one is which.
Sure.
But one thing that I find is that when I kind of take notes and put down ideas and stuff in like a like Word document or Excel or whatever, I often find that I put down a lot more disposable ideas that are a little bit maybe more wasteful than I would in a notebook where it's like I don't know, when you're handwriting it takes a little bit more effort, so it's like you want to make sure that the idea you put down is a little bit more valuable.
Yeah.
And so it's like I feel like when I'm not on a computer I'm less wasteful in my efforts in trying to kind of, you know, create ideas.
For sure. Yeah. And that's, yeah, like I can type, you know, all day long and like I have a pretty good typing speed, but you know, yeah, the result of that is like any sort of garbage will come tumbling out. And you know, when you're writing it down, you have to look at like your hand forming these words. And like, by the time you get to the end of the line, you will realize like, this is a shit idea. So yeah, it just gives you like, you know, that sort of 7-second delay where you can just toss something out because it's not even worth considering.
I have to ask about the Crowded experience. Do you have backups? Like if you lost that Crowded book, like for real, do you not have that backed up anywhere?
No, I mean it's a notebook.
I know. I don't know if you like transcribe it or something.
Mean, no, I mean I guess I could scan it, but no, I don't have any of my notebooks backed up. Like they're just yeah, they're all made of paper. So not, that's where it all breaks down. Is like the preservability isn't awesome, but you know, that's kind of why I like them, I guess.
Yeah, sure. I was reading about your wood shopping one, which I think is spectacular, where it's a notebook where you just give yourself a page to figure out a story. Do you kind of feel like with that one, it's like if you can't figure it out within that page, it's probably not an idea worth pursuing?
Pretty much. I mean, there haven't been any that I've rejected in there that I've gone back to and been like, oh, this is how it works. I think, yeah, giving myself two sides of a page to see if there's something. If I can't find something there, then at least for me, there's no there. So yeah, no, it's a good way to just sort of like take all the weird, disparate stuff that I'm interested in and see if I can sort of reverse engineer my obsessions into a book.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of feel like I see a lot of that in, you know, all the works that you do, because it does feel like, I don't know. I feel like when I saw that you got a 3D printer, it kind of made a lot of sense for a lot of the books you do, because it seems like you have a lot of interest in, you know, future technology or like the way that the world is going, but in a slightly askew way. Like what is, I'm trying to remember how you guys phrase Crowded. It's like Crowded is like future, but it's like 15 minutes in the future, isn't it? Isn't that it?
10 minutes in the future. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I love that. I did want to ask about something that's like a recurring theme in your work in general. As I was telling you before, and I have to give a shout out because it's not very often that I actually shout out another interviewer. I was reading a recent interview with that you did with WMQ Comics' Will Nevin, which, as I told you before, was frustratingly good and made me rethink how I had approached this interview. But you talked about how, or like it kind of came up that there was a recurring theme to your work that I was already kind of connecting to you personally, but you did it yourself in that piece. And that's how in some ways you're like a part of your own story in a way, and how many of them are about finding your place in the world.
Hmm.
And that made me curious, like, is exploring, like, when you explore these kinds of questions, is that kind of therapeutic for you at all, or is it more of a situation where you're trying to aim to write an interesting story and these questions just come out because it's hard to avoid yourself when you're writing?
It's definitely the latter. Like I don't set out on any book to be like, now I'm going to figure out what's wrong with it. Like, yeah, like, and a lot of my books, I don't know what they're about until I'm halfway through working on them. And that's like something I wasn't quite aware of until I was doing the Short Order Crooks, which is all about cooking and like running your own food truck and stuff. And about halfway through that, I realized I was writing about being a freelancer in comics, basically, and like I was like, oh, that's what this is about. Is like this is about like trying to create stuff in a world where it's just super hard to do that, I guess. So yeah, I guess I'm getting more cognizant of it a little bit sooner. But it's hard to. I don't think I've ever written a thing where I've kept myself out of it completely. Even like the work for hire stuff I do, parts of you sneak in. But yeah, I guess I'm just, I just want to write a really cool book. And if I happen to work some shit out in there, or I happen to do something that helps somebody else work their shit out, all the better. But that's just a side effect, if anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's two things. One, like, I think it would probably be pretty hard for you to go in and, like, deliberately do that. Like, if you started with the idea of, like, I'm going to do something, like, to, like, treat myself, I don't know if that'd be a good path to having a good story. And then beyond that, it seems to me that it'd be hard to not have part of yourself show up in every book, because if you did do that, like, I don't know, you'd probably have to be restricting yourself to the point where you're not really writing organically.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I was trying to keep myself out of things entirely, then, half my ideas would never come to fruition. So, it's an inevitable bleed. It's just, I try not to be too specific about, pointing out like, oh, yep, that's me. Or, but when I go back and look at some of this stuff, I can definitely see my most sort of Mary Sue moments, in a lot of my work.
Yo, everybody. I want to take a second to talk about my friends at TKO Studios. TKO Studios is a new comic publisher that launched with what the New York Times calls an impressive slate of talent. They publish books by top creators, including Roxane Gay, Jeff Lemire, Garth Ennis, Gabriel Walta, and many more. TKO also does things differently than other publishers. They binge release their books and offer each title in whatever format you most enjoy reading your comics in, whether that's a 6-issue set in a collector's box, trade paperback, or digital download. I'm a single issues guy, so I went that route and I love the collector's box. Even better, all of TKO's first issues are free to read at tkopresents.com right now. So if you're curious, visit tkopresents.com to give them a try, or follow at TKO Presents across all social platforms. And if you're a store that's interested in stocking TKO's books, email retailers at tkopresents.com to learn more about one of the best retailer deals in the industry. And now, back to the show. I was really blown away when I was reading about Test that part of that came from the fact that you worked in a market research firm. Like, that is probably the last job I could imagine you having. How did that? I mean, I guess it was probably just one of those jobs you have when you're like trying to figure out what you really want to do. But at the same time, I'm just like, I'm trying to imagine you going through all of that, and it just seems, I don't know. I mean, I guess when I was thinking about it, it kind of feels like it could have been like a weirdly foundational experience for you, because, like, I don't know, did that affect your worldview in a way, even outside of Test?
Yeah, no, that was probably the most like influential job I've ever had. And I think you're envisioning something far fancier than what it actually was. So I worked in a room full of recruiters, and we would call people to be in the focus groups. So we weren't, running the things and interacting with the fancy clients. We were
you were assembling.
like a bunch of, Yeah, we were just a bunch of dirtbags in an office who were just like calling our friends and like drinking buddies and basically anybody we could get to fill up these groups. And we would, feed them the right answers to say. There were professionals who knew when jobs were going on and they would like weasel their way in. They'd wear disguises and stuff. Like it was it was basically like a criminal empire being run inside of a real business. But like my boss was like a big time cocaine user and gambler. And at one point he had his drug dealer's wife come work there. There were weeks where, all of us were expecting like the cops to bust in and arrest everybody. So yeah, like that very much like, when I left that job, there was a lot of regret because I wanted to see how the story ended.
Do you ever look back? You're like, is this business still going?
Oh no, I kept it like a year after I left. So like I left and I moved to Kansas City, and then I think a year or two later, my boss got beat up in the bathroom by some guys he owed money to, and then he got fired. And I was like, damn, if I had just held out a little bit longer, I could have been there when Mike got the crap kicked out of him. But yeah, I mean, the side benefit was that I got to see how market research works. And occasionally they would call me in to do like transcribing for groups that were going on. So I got to see, how it all worked and just like how sort of fake it all was. So, not to get too Holden Caulfield or anything, but like it definitely was like, oh, this is all just like a lie that we all agree to. And so, yeah, like that was super influential on me, but I didn't have a story there until, like 6 years ago or so.
Yeah. It kind of sounds like Office Space meets Boiler Room, which is like a really weird combination of movies.
Yeah, no, it was. I mean, and it's something I want to. I think it's one of the zines I'm going to do next. Is I'm going to try and put it all down on paper. But yeah, it's the most like. It's like the job I had to leave to save myself, but it's also the job I was most sad about leaving because every day was like, what new terrifying shit is going to happen?
Yeah, no, I work at an advertising agency and I've worked to like put together focus groups, slightly different, but at the same time, the idea that the same people show up over and over is very real. Like,
yeah,
it's amazing. It's just like their job becomes the person who effectively is helping these organizations and businesses decide what the general public thinks. I'm like, this is not the general public. This is the same dude.
Yeah.
How is this person dictating what's good?
And they're usually wildly like uninformed about everything.
Oh yeah.
Somebody got in trouble once because they booked this guy. It was Ed something. But they booked him into a computer group and he goes in, sits down with the interviewer. It was a one-on-one. And she was like, okay, like use the mouse to turn on the computer. And he literally picks the mouse up like a remote control.
Oh my God.
And clicks it at the screen. And somebody got in big trouble for that. But yeah, that was like the norm, was just people who didn't know what they were talking about. They just wanted the $75. And they'd pass the info. Like there was an underground network of them and they'd tell each other about it. So
I wonder if does this happen on the dark web? Is this what's happening on the dark web and I don't even know it?
I think the dark web's a lot more boring than any of us suspect.
Probably. It's just like people sharing notes about places you can get money if you go and talk about like the internet. Well, okay, so let's talk about Test, which is your book that launches, I guess 2 days after this podcast is going to go up with, it's with Jen Hickman and Hassan Otsman-El-How, and oh my God, I completely forgot the colorist's name. I am so sorry.
Harry Saxon.
Harry Saxon. Yes. So,
wait, does this go up tomorrow?
This will be going up tomorrow. Yeah.
Oh no, we got pushed back to July 3rd.
Never mind. This will be going up July. Whoa. So that means Crowded number 7 and Test number 1 drops on the same day.
Yeah.
Ooh,
yeah, it was not planned, but here we are.
That's interesting. Like, I imagine that makes that like that Wednesday. Does that become like a bundle of emotions for you?
I mean, I think I've processed most of the emotions by the time it comes out. I'm always curious to see how it lands with people, but I've already gone through all the ups and downs of like, does this suck?
Right.
Or is this great? And yeah, so I've already had this battle, so now I'm just curious to see.
What people are going to think about it.
Yeah, and it's always a little bit nerve wracking because maybe somebody will hate it, but I also realize that like somebody's always going to hate it. So
Yeah. There's always going to be one person who hates something. So it's like, it's completely unavoidable. But, well, I've read both Crowded Number 7 and Test Number 1, and I will say that I liked both of them quite a bit. So that if that matters anything, there you go.
Thank you.
But in regards to Test, though, Test is a very interesting book in a lot of ways. But I find it's an interesting book that I really like, that's really fascinating, and it has like a lot of like, the sheer idea of like test market towns. When I read your creative statement that you had on Paste, I honestly thought you made that up. Like, I thought that was just fiction that you put into your creative statement, and I was just like, this is confusing, but that is a real thing. Yeah. And so like all this stuff is like a deeply illuminating view into a world that I don't understand. But it's also kind of a hard book to talk about. It's like,
Yeah.
it's kind of like a tough elevator pitch, because I don't know. I mean, like, how have you figured out how you're describing it yet?
No, it's like, and my main elevator pitch for this book is like, I don't know how to write an elevator pitch for this book. Like, it just feels too big and strange, and too many things going on to sum it up as like, I guess my easiest summary is like, a future addict comes or discovers a mythical town where they're test marketing the future. But like, I mean, and that was my initial pitch, but I think the book has changed so much and become so much about the main character and kind of just how they exist in this world. But yeah, I don't. Yeah, it's nothing like I anticipated it would be when I was working on it several years ago, and I think it's so much better because of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a book that like, it's the first time where I'm just like, I just would just have to like hand it to somebody and be like, that's the only really real way to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it really, it reminds me, I don't know, God, like, I've never played like Shadowrun, like the like actual on RPG, but I played like there was like a Shadowrun, I think it was like either Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis game, where it was very like you're modding out your body, and like you have like all this like cyberpunk type elements, and you're like kind of always on the run. And like the funny thing is like it really evoked those feelings when I was reading it. I was like in the most opposite experience you possibly can have when I was reading it. I was like sitting out in my yard with my cats running around with the sun on me, and I'm reading this book about Aleph Knoll, who's trying to discover this mythical test town where they're test marketing the future, because they are like this person who is basically body hacking themselves to like, I don't know, like get closer to the future, like get to this feeling that they're looking to find. And it was like, I don't know. I mean, it evoked a feeling in me that was like, I don't know, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. So it was like a very potent experience, but it was funny because like afterwards I was like, I don't know how to describe this to somebody.
Yeah. No, it's definitely been troublesome. I mean, it feels like, to me, it feels like we've made like a Euro comic.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know that any of us set out to do that, but I just think, that's the magic of comics, is like, you get a group of people together, and something that you thought was going to be one thing turns into something like, so much of the book has changed from after me writing the first issue and seeing Jen's pages come in, like, and seeing what they were doing, just like, I don't know, gave me permission to go directions I wasn't thinking about before.
Sure.
So yeah, it's still like, I know where it ends, but like how we're getting there has become a little fuzzy to me.
So what did it start as? Like, what was the origin of Test?
I mean, the origin was, I was working, I think I was like flatting comics, and I was listening to a Patton Oswalt album, and he was talking about this KFC thing called a Mega Leg.
Yeah, yeah.
And that he found out about it from like a makeup artist, and she was like, oh yeah, I live in this town where they're constantly like unveiling new products like that, so we got like the KFC Sadness Bowl like a year before everybody else did. And it reminded me of like, oh right, there are actually like towns where they do this, like there's a town in Ohio, I think it might be Columbus, maybe not, but where it's just these towns where the makeup in terms of age and gender and ethnicity sort of fit a marketing person's ideal scenario.
It's like a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it's like a perfect to their minds. It's a perfect cross section of everybody they want to be selling to, and so yeah, they will like take these new ideas and they'll start selling them there and see how it goes over with the town. And, if it does well, then they'll roll it out further. And if it doesn't, then just these people in this town are the only people who have like had this experience of going in and buying this mistake.
Like the Sadness Bowl.
Yeah. And it just like from there, I just thought about like how much bigger and worse it could get. So yeah, and then it was just like a thing that I think that was in 2012, maybe 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't, I spent a lot of time working with a different publisher where I was trying to pitch it to them. And my editor there gave me a lot of great notes that really helped sort of refocus me. I think I hit this weird spot where what the pitches I was writing were all concept and no character. And I think Test was like one of the books where I really noticed that and had to pull back and restructure and be like, no, I have to write all my pitches. Like front and center has to be the main character. Because if you don't know who that person is or give a crap about them, why does any of this other stuff matter?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Test has been a weird book because it's helped like reformulate a lot of stuff for me. But yeah, I brought it to Vault and they got right away sort of what I was going for, which was sort of like I just wanted to do like a cool kind of like man with no name type Western. A stranger comes to town, shit pops off, but weirder.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, then once Jen came on board and I was talking to them about it, that changed a lot of my ideas. And Jen was finishing up a book, so we had to wait, which gave me a lot more time to process. And so it's just been this thing that like, it's been sort of a test unto itself. I've just been like sort of fine tuning and throwing parts out that I thought used to work and don't work anymore. And now I'm just kind of, I don't know. When I turned in the third issue, I included a note to Adrian at Vault saying like, I understand if you hate this because it gets really, really weird, but it feels right. And luckily he didn't hate it. So
that's great. I do want to say, weirdly, the character first thing is super important for me, but I think the relationship that kind of like did it for me is for some reason I'm really invested in like Aleph and Mary having a relationship, despite the fact that Mary is like an onboard AI of some sort that kind of helps Aleph figure things out. Like actually one of my questions, and I'm just going to do it right here, is I did want to ask the question that Mary asks Aleph in the first issue, because I'm curious as to what your answer is. You're planning on seeing a film, but discover it has horrible ratings. Do you see it anyway? Pick a different movie or stay home?
These days I'd probably just stay home.
I mean, if you were invested in it, like if it was like something that is very on your brand, but it's like just happens to have bad ratings, like Godzilla, King of the Monsters, like had like not necessarily great reviews, but I love kaiju movies. I had to see that.
Yeah. Then yeah, I would still go see it if it was like, but it has to be supremely like it has to be something like when I went to see the movie Tickled. Like I saw that in theaters first showing the day it opened, like because I was super invested in seeing this creepy documentary. So if that had gotten bad ratings, I still would have gone. But yeah, more and more, I'm just like the times I do go out, it's like this is on me, but I went and saw like the Pet Cemetery remake, and I was like, oh my, like it's so much worse than like, I don't know.
I had
Yeah, there
somebody
was
try to talk me into seeing that, and I don't know if I should trust that person's
no,
judgment.
don't trust them. At least not on this. Like,
Yeah. Well, they work in my comic shop, so this may be negatively impacting them. But I do that question. As soon as I read that, for some reason, like that was my in point. Like, you know, it's like you're reading something and you have something that convinces you that you're very into this. Like there's something you connect there, and that was it for me. And I don't know why. It was like a simple question that I feel like Aleph did not really appreciate the complexity to, and I feel like it's going to continue paying off down the line. Or I'm just reading way too much into this.
no. I mean, I chose that for a reason. Like, it's very much like, I kind of wish like that some conversations with people would go like that, where it's not like you have to figure out what are we going to talk about. It's just like, here's the topic. I'm just going to throw a topic out there. Like, it's like where everyday life is like doing a podcast. Because sometimes I have a lot of trouble like figuring out like how do I generate speech. So that's another peril of being a freelancer. So yeah, like the idea of just like doing these sort of like void conf questions as everyday convo.
Yeah, maybe that's why I identify with Mary so much. Is basically like my podcaster self is an AI that I just ask questions about, questions to people. Well, the last thing I want to bring up though is I really love the combination of the fact that it has the Vault Vintage cover, which they're doing to promote these books, like they're a variant, is a Transmetropolitan one, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you selected that book or what, but the fact that you have a Transmet Vintage cover, but you also had Warren Ellis write about it in his newsletter was a very nice combination. I don't know if those two things are related though.
No. I didn't know they were doing the Transmet cover, which was a very nice surprise. And I sent the book to Warren just because I don't know. I like to tempt fate.
You were a Warren Ellis forums guy, right?
I was, but Warren and I had what could at times be considered a contentious relationship. So like, and it wasn't like we hated each other. It was just like, we just occasionally, a lot of the time, didn't get along. And I think a lot of the, like when I started breaking into comics, I didn't want to use like any connection with him. Like I wanted to like, it was almost like, it wasn't a spite thing, but it felt like a spite thing. It's like, I'm going to get there like on my own 2 feet. And then I'm going to start like sending you my stuff and asking for quotes and stuff. So I guess I finally felt like I hit the point where it was like, okay, now I can approach Warren. Like I've proven myself to not be a complete hack.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, sending him test was super nerve wracking though, just because like, like that's Warren's specialty is like talking about future stuff and like, a lot of the stuff in there is stuff that he has dealt with. So I sent it to him and I didn't hear anything. And I was like, that's fine. Like that's A-okay with me. And then, yeah, when he wrote about it, I was like, well, that's like
the ideal result.
It's a weird fantasy. Yeah. Like when he gave us a quote for Shanghai Red and I was just like, I don't even know. Like, yeah, it was super baffling. It's still like the fact that like, if it wasn't for Warren, I wouldn't be writing comics basically. So to have him like actually like my stuff is super strange.
I do think that like in a lot of ways it does feel like your most Warren Ellis like idea yet, but it's still like very quintessentially you, which is like a nice blend. Like, you never want to be the person who is doing an impersonation of somebody else. And I feel like you find the right level there.
No, and I think like at this point it's kind of hard to do a book and not have it seem like reminiscent of something else, and especially with this it was like I don't know, it definitely felt a little bit Ellis-y to me, but I try to I try to make everything at least like recognizable as my own, for good or for ill.
Sure. Well, I want to talk about Crowded for a bit, but I did want to ask about, Test and Crowded, obviously, like hugely different books in terms
Mhm.
of tone. And, like Crowded is, despite the fact it is basically a book about two people perpetually trying to get murdered, it is like a joyful experience. And I do wonder if, do you get different things from writing those? Like when you write Crowded, like, does that affect your mood?
Yeah, I guess like Crowded is just nonstop fun to work on. Like it's fun to write, it's fun to outline it, it's fun to write solicits for it. Like everything about it is just like I am always super excited to write Crowded. And occasionally it can be a little rough, like trying to figure some stuff out, but never where I'm like hitting my head against the wall. Test, however, is one of those books. It is supremely hard. It might be the hardest book I've written so far, just in terms of like how much I've struggled with each script so far. Which like, yeah, definitely like tends to dampen my mood a bit. And just the subject matter is like much darker and a bit more somber. So yeah, like it's a more funereal. Is that a word? Funereal.
I think funereal. I don't know. It's something close to there. I'm gonna
Yeah,
count
yeah.
it.
All right, good. It's one of those experiences.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so the new arc, near as I can tell, is taking Vita and Charlie on the road, and I mean, given the fact that it kicks off with a large fight on a Elon Musk like hypertube, which was pretty great. It seems like it's going to be giving you a lot of opportunities to show off how odd the world is in like 10 minutes in the future. So I mean, I guess for listeners who are Crowded fans or people who are interested in getting the book, like where are you planning on taking this this arc, and like what opportunities does it provide for you, both for like, revealing a little bit more about Vita and Charlie, but also showing off this world?
I mean, the so much of the first arc was about building the world and building up who Vita and Charlie are and who they are with each other and separate from each other. And so it feels like we did all that hard work and had a lot of fun doing it. But now that we've done that, like now we can get to the really fun stuff where we start to really unpeel who Charlie and Vita are. And it's just like, yeah, I don't know. It's like where you've established all the ground rules and you know what you sort of know what you can and can't do. And this one, I've just been like giving myself permission to sort of push things a little further, within reason. Like we can't, there's an internal logic to Crowded in terms of like what technology we can use and what we can't. So,
Like Hyperloop seems close enough that you can do that, and it
yeah,
also is easy. I mean, it's also good because you can make fun of it. Because I don't know. I mean, I'm sure people have differing opinions on it, but I think Hyperloop sounds stupid. I mean, I could be very much wrong about that, but it just
as a name or as a concept.
I mean, kind of concept, at least in its current state. I mean, it seems like a great idea in theory. It just seems like the execution doesn't quite match it yet. But I guess that's why it's 10 minutes in the future.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know, maybe it'll be super cool, but like, yeah, I like, so much of this book is about like a world where everybody just said yes to tech bros even more than they do in this world. Like,
What a horrifying idea that is.
yeah, no, and it took, again, like that was the thing. It took me a bit to figure out that this was sort of the big theme, but yeah, it's a world where like, oh, you want to like, reinvent like bodegas as small boxes inside of apartment buildings that you just swipe your credit card in. Like, cool, we'll let you do that. Or you want to, publish everybody's financial records. Cool, like we'll sign on for that.
So it's like
it's
instead of a test town, it's like a test world.
Yeah. I mean, but it's not too far off.
Oh no, I know.
Like, like, and occasionally it feels like we're really racing to stay ahead of where things are.
Well, and I remember I was in the audience at Image Expo when you announced it, and it was, out of all the books that were announced, it was like the most appealing one to me, just because Reaper and Defend. What Reaper, for listeners that don't know, is like the crowdfunding platform in Crowded, where basically you can contribute to a fund to have a person murdered, like assassinated, and like it's within the legality of the world. And Defend is basically the opposite of that, in which you can hire a bodyguard to protect you. Well, I mean, I guess you don't have to just do it in situations where it's a Reaper like situation.
Yeah, it can be for anything.
It can be for anything. And so, like, when I heard that, it was just, it's one of those situations where you just laugh and then you're like, wait a second, that actually sounds like a real thing. And
Yeah.
and like I think that's where like the very small part where it's like when you get the right blend of those two ideas where it's just kind of a perfect idea because of it.
Yeah, I got lucky that just like everything kind of came together the way it did. Like this book went through so many different iterations of like what it could have been, that, you know, I think I just had to wait until things were so screwed up that like it's like now is the time.
Yeah. I also like, I don't know, the seventh issue, and I'm not going to go too deep into it, but like Charlie is a really interesting. Well, Charlie and Vita are just an interesting pair, just because Vita is just always Vita. Like I think Vita even says the truth about herself in the issue, and Charlie just doesn't even think anything of it. And then Charlie goes on this whole soliloquy talking about her past, and it's just like you can't believe anything Charlie has to say because they're not just like an unreliable narrator; they're like an unreliable everything.
Yeah,
and it's just like the compliment, or the way that those two blend together is like a perfect odd couple, which is really, it goes back to what you're saying about Test. Like where you're trying to make sure that you had the character in it. It's like Crowded it has this great high concept, but the reason why it really works is because of Vita and Charlie and how they complement each other so well. And I think that the first issue in the second arc does a really good job of both underlining that and pushing it forward.
Sweet. Yeah. No, and Crowded was another book that like I pitched around. And I think the same editor who I worked with for Test was like, yeah, we think it's a cool idea, but like, who are these people?
Right.
And yeah, like, so yeah, Crowded was nothing until I figured out who Vita and Charlie were. And then, you know, the way it happens with all my books is like, oh, the concept is now secondary. Like, I just want to like hang out with them and see what they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and I love the cast. It's just such a huge part of the book. You know, I did want to ask about a question about both Test and Crowded, and it kind of relates to something that somebody had brought up to me semi-recently, and it's maybe something that's kind of lost about particularly Crowded. Basically, all the characters in Crowded are queer, and like Aleph in Test is non-binary, but in both, they're not exactly like featured elements of the stories. They're there, but they're not like called out by any means. They're just part of the world. Like, I mean, it's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously Test isn't even out yet, so it's too early to tell there. But do you feel like, at least in Crowded, that's like overlooked to a degree?
A what?
Overlooked?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think probably, but you know, like, I mean, maybe that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, you know, it hasn't been until recently that I've been sort of like mentioning the queer stuff on social media more, just because I do feel like maybe it's not as recognized. But I mean, yeah, when I don't want to do books where it's like, hey, look at this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's just, you know, yeah, I want it to feel totally normal. I want it to feel like, well, this is who this person is, and, you know, any other iteration would feel wrong. So,
if you spend too much time calling it out, it just feels like maybe that might make it feel a little bit more empty.
Yeah, or that, you know, like oh, look at this brave choice I made. And it's just like, no, like I'm trying to build the kind of worlds that, you know, are hard to find in comics, or, you know, in quote unquote mainstream comics. Like, yeah, I'm just trying to like, and also I'm just trying to get, you know, as far away from myself as possible. So, you know, I don't want to just explore a world of people who look like me, or who are me. So, like exploring this stuff just makes things more. It makes it more difficult because I don't want to fuck it up.
Right.
But I mean, I think that's only a good thing. Like it just makes me think harder about the choices that I'm making and why am I making these choices.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that like the way that you handle it in test in particular is really well done because it's just like a lot of it's in like the pronouns and everything like that. And it also makes sense at the core of Aleph as a person because Aleph is, I mean, they're modding out their own body. It would make sense that like there would be a certain level of fluidity there, I guess, if it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like, yeah, trying to, I mean, I think, I just kind of came to the decision that like, I can't figure out what gender this person is. So this person, like neither of them feels right. So, non-binary felt like who they were and sort of what they're going, they're trying to become something post-human. And, that's very much like an idea of like, is there a point where like we can evolve to a point where like gender isn't so locked in as it is? Same with like sexuality. Like, is there a point where like this will no longer be a thing that like is a thing that's highlighted? It's just a thing that is like,
right.
So I'm trying to write these worlds where like, this is a thing that is, and we've skipped past all the discourse and discussions about it.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, I just had one more question about Crowded, and I actually this is a patron question, and the person was wondering. They said they saw a tweet from you recently about how having a popular creator-owned title doesn't necessarily mean you and the rest of the Crowded team feels like financially secure. And I know that like Ro and Ted, like in particular, needed to sell some original art from the book to make sure it kept going. Like, do you feel like, I mean, this is a broader question, but it's also in specific relation to the work you've done. Like, do you feel like sometimes there's a gap between the perception and realities of creator-owned economics? Because it's like, you would think on the surface that Crowded would be this giant success because it's an Eisner nominee book and a lot of people talk about it on social media and everything like that. Is there a gap there?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, like even, it's like there's like one in 36 books that sort of like hit that amazing spot. And, everybody else is kind of chasing that. And, you're not only are you in competition with like hundreds of books from hundreds of other creator owned books, but you also have, licensed and superhero stuff. And you're also competing with video game. Like it's just,
you're competing with Netflix, everything.
Yeah. Like you're complete. Yeah. Like
it's a battle for time.
It is, yeah, and I certainly understand that. Like, I don't have time to do nearly half the dumb fun things I want to do. So, it's not been, we're definitely like struggling to make this book the way we want to make it, and we might have to make some hard choices coming up, but that's the way of the world, I guess. Like I've just kind of, it's like you can do everything right. And, it's just, we're all doing fine and the book is doing well enough that like, we're not losing money on the book. And,
right.
Like the movie, the screenplay is done. And I think Rebel's like going to take it out, in the next couple months. So, we have that. So, it's like, but so much of comics now is like trying to think of like things outside of your comics revenue, I guess. Mm-hmm. Single issues are by and large are loss leaders. They're
advertisements for the trade.
Exactly. Yeah. And, I love doing single issues and I don't want to stop doing them. But, if we have to move to trade only for the last 2 volumes, we'll do that. And we'll figure out a way to make the money work. Like, so, so much of my career, I feel like has been me experimenting with stuff. And, we're just at a point where like, there's just too much good stuff out there.
Yeah.
And, so, boo-hoo, but you can, I think unless you're doing Saga or,
Quick and
Um,
divine.
yeah, like yeah, you're always as a creator on book, you're always going to be struggling, and you're always going to be like desperate to get each new reader on board. So it's a process that like I mean I took so long to come back to Image. I did my first book at Image back in 2010,
Hmm.
2011. And then I was like, okay, well now I have to like make myself ready to come back to Image. So it took like 7 years to do it, and I still don't like, and it feels like so much of comics has changed in those 7 years that like it felt like a lot of the lessons that I learned were like, oh, these are all out the window now. Now you have to like relearn the landscape, I guess. I don't know. It's comics. It's super weird. Like I don't understand how a lot of it works, and in the end, we're all just trying to like put out a book that we're super proud of, that like we own. We don't have to compromise on. We don't have to do anything we don't want to, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you were talking about like kind of trying to find other ways. I mean, I think one of the interesting things about comics, but also like the broader world, like if you walk through Artist Alley, it's like once upon a time people were just selling like, oh, here's a copy of my trade and here's some comics and here's like commissions. But now it's like people are selling merch. Like I went by a writer. I mean, you sell merch.
Yeah.
And like I have to imagine that your 3D printing game is going to affect you at cons, because I can imagine you can like actually put together like custom 3D printing type stuff, which would be really cool. But I do think it's interesting how comics and people within comics have had to kind of like turn into not just creators but also like merchandisers in a lot of ways, because you have to find ways to like diversify your revenue streams.
Yeah, and you have to learn marketing, and like it's just, it's but all the stuff I didn't want to know about, but it's what you have to do to, be a marginal success in this industry, and you have to just like, like talking to strangers, no thank you, but like that's part of my job, and so I have to suck it up and do it. And yeah, like I never would have thought I would have any merch to offer anybody, but it's like you realize that some people, maybe they already bought all your books and they just want to like give you money for something. So I've already been using the 3D printer for like promotional items.
Mm,
So I definitely have some designs on stuff. I'm actually going to start like next week. I think I'm going to take a couple commissions to make some boxes.
nice.
Um, Cause yeah, I want to like, like I love writing, but I also, I want to expand from there. Like I don't, yeah, I don't know. It's too easy to get to the point where like this thing that you love has now become your job. And no matter how much you love your job, occasionally it'll grind on you because it's a job.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm trying to sort of diversify my idea of like what my job is.
Well, and even beyond that, it's like you're finding something for yourself. It's like if you can make money off of it, that'd be super great. But at the same time, it's like,
Yeah.
it's if you have that one thing for yourself, it's like maybe it makes the rest of it a little bit easier. Like I'm doing this piece on Comic Twart. I don't know if you remember Comic Twart, but there was like the sketch art blog, and I was talking to one of the people that was on there about how doing Comic Twart made them enjoy that. It was like it'd been a while since they looked at the act of drawing as something that they enjoy, and so like doing that kind of made them enjoy drawing more, and like gave them a brief respite from having to do sequential work. And it's good to find something for yourself. It's like going back to what we were talking about taking weekends off and walking Zola and everything. It's like if you don't have that time, if you don't have like that extra space for yourself, then it makes all of the rest of it feel like even more of a drag.
Yeah. Um, and like to go back to the like merchandising and stuff is like I think that stuff can only be helpful to creators.
Totally.
It's trying to figure out like it's like I was reading something from a woman whose job is professionally to name things.
Like what kind
she
of things?
like products
Oh, okay.
and companies. She just comes up with names for things, but she was talking about this idea of like these brands that have pivoted, so they're not about a specific food anymore. Like that the brand is now like their name itself. I can't remember what she was bringing up, but
Well, look at Dunkin' Donuts. It's like just Dunkin' now
that's
or
the
whatever.
exact one. Yeah, she's like that was perfect. They should, like they pivoted, and now everybody calls them Dunkin', and it's like the donuts is an afterthought. Like, and I think like for me, I don't want to just be thought of as like, oh, he's a dude who writes comics. Like I want. I mean, I feel like I can encompass more things, and like, it's all like I keep saying, it's all a grand experiment. So I feel like all the merch stuff and like trying to figure out how to make creator-owned comics work is, that's like 50% of the job of being a creator is like, how do I make this work, and how do I keep doing this for the rest of my life?
Yeah, there's a certain amount of like mad science to it. I mean, like I was reading in that interview you did with WMQ about how Heartthrob might end up being like digital singles in a print trade instead of print singles in a print trade.
Yeah.
Well, and digital singles. But I mean, it's like sometimes if you're trying to keep a book going, it's like you have to try different things. And I know Image has like Motor Crush is a book that moved over to trade only, or graphic novels, I guess at this point. And it's like, if one path isn't necessarily working from a pure numbers standpoint, then trying something else like is a good thing. I guess that's the thing.
Yeah,
it's like I often, one of the things that bothers me the most about comics is like comics often feels like they're like the industry as a whole is like resigned to just doing the same thing the way it's always been done because that's the way you do it, and that's just like I don't know. Blows my mind because it's like it's a horrible way to grow a business.
Yeah, and I think like so many, like the bestsellers in comics have all proven that like, oh no, like we're not going to accept, like Iron Circus is like, oh, like people look down on crowdfunding your own books. Well, like we'll turn it into an entire business model, and like stuff like that is like you have to, at the end of the day, like you want your books out there and you want people reading them. Like if you get not even rich off of it, like if you make a sustainable income off it, all the better. But I think when it comes down to it, like your main concern has to be like wanting people to read your stuff, to see what you're making, the art that you're doing, and you just pray that you can figure out a way to make it work.
One model I'm surprised that like seemingly almost no one else has tried is like Brian K. Vaughan and Marcos Martin had a lot of success with the Private Eye at the very least. I don't know why like a big creative team like hasn't taken that panel syndicate route. I mean, granted there's a lot of infrastructure involved there, but it's like it is kind of like creator owned to the absolute max, and there's no reason why you can't release it and trade again later. And I don't know. I mean, I know it's more complicated than I'm making it seem, but at the same time, like if you're an established creator, it seems like a pretty appealing path. I don't know.
Yeah, I just think there's a level of establishment you have to be at to make something like that work.
Totally. It worked for BKV and Marcos Martin because they're BKV and Marcos Martin.
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, Brian K. Vaughan could have like literally like probably just drawn it himself and
still have been so much worse.
Pretty decent sales. So, I mean, but that's like a thing, that I keep running up against in comics is like trying to figure out like
where you are,
what level am I at? Yeah. And like it's all a mystery, like, until you're somebody like Brian K. Vaughan and you know definitively what level you're at. I think for the rest of us, we're all just trying to figure out like, what can I sustain? Like, and it goes all the way down to like, figuring out like, okay, what kind of book am I going to pitch? Because like, given how the market is, like I can't shoot for, the 30 issues I think it should be. Or maybe I just won't pitch it at all until I am a more quote unquote important creator and I can flex that kind of muscle to get those issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that certainly complicates it because it's like it's not just thinking about story anymore. It's thinking about format, and it's thinking about length, and it's thinking about everything else. There's a lot more consideration to it than I think people give these things credit for.
Yeah.
Well, the last question is another patron question I had, and it's about how you almost, they said almost exclusively, but I feel like you do exclusively work. Do you exclusively work in creator owned right now?
I mean, outside of like Evolution,
Yeah.
that's we're wrapping that up. So yeah, I'm pretty much 100% creator.
Sure. So because of that, do you feel like you have extra pressure on yourself to always have pitches ready to keep your slate full? Or is it, I don't know. I guess there's like a balance there because you don't want to feel overburdened by future projects, but at the same time, you don't want to be left with nothing on your plate if one of your books goes away.
Right.
Like, no, is there a balance there?
Yeah, I always have a buttload of prospective books in some level of development. Some are just at the pitch stage. Some I've like gone ahead and written the first script. It all kind of depends on how confident I feel about it, or how figured out I do or don't have it. But I think it's important to have not even just in case like one of your books goes away, but like in the process of working, you run into blocks and stoppages, and for whatever reason, just like you and this book aren't clicking right now. So to have something that has no expectations, like nobody's waiting on it, it's not a real thing yet, but it's something you can keep working on while your brain sort of figures out how to get through this wall, all the better. So I think it works really well on a creative level. But yeah, I mean, I constantly have to be thinking about, okay, like what am I going to be doing in 2021 now? Which is just like, it's such an exhausting thought, like, but it's what you got to do. So I'm mostly trying to get to the point. I just want to get to the point where I don't have to, or where like my furthest thought out is like, what am I going to do? Like, where am I going to go home for Christmas?
Yeah. I was mapping out something for a client the other day, and I got to the point where I wrote 2020, and I was like, I know this is like a stupid thing to say because it's 2019 and it shouldn't be that big of a deal. But for some reason, 2020, it was just like, in my head when I got to that point, I'm like, this feels too future. How are we this far? What is going on? It's weird. The future is a crazy place. Well, Chris, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on and talking everything about comics, tests, Crowded, and everything else. Best of luck with all your books.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on again.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with writer Christopher Sebela. You can find him on Twitter at xtop and his work in Trustfall, Crowded, which returns on July 3rd, and Test, which launches on the 3rd as well. As a heads up, Off Panel is once again brought to you by Sketch.com. Check out the new version of the site and consider subscribing for access to all of the site's content and its members-only forum. If you're a fan of Off Panel, make sure to check it out on Patreon. If you back the show on there, you not only support it, but you get early access to each week's podcast, access to weekly content, and more. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Off Panel on iTunes or Spotify and give the show a rating and review while you're at it. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking it on Facebook at /Sketched, that's SKTCHD, following it on Twitter at SketchComic, or following me at @SlicedFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Nathan House, Litwin Studios, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Troy Jeffrey Allen, Liana Kangas, Keegan Ray, Milton Lawson, Wesley Gibb, Sean Kirkham, Harry Small, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwan, Connor Farner, Vida Ayala, JDC and Matt Gagnon, Aditya Bidikar, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, Kieran Mark Antonio, WMQ Comics, Akil, Greg Lockard, Kokachi, Phil White, Ben Becker, Sean Pinello, Kent Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, Nick Michelin, David Kelly, Robert Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Owen McCready, Brendan Fletcher, Gary Maloney, Jonathan Nielsen, Matthew Groom, Jason Nassy, Adam Bogert, Xavier Files, Maria Schweitzer, Matthew Taylor, Tyler Turner, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Braldy, Ira James Udaskin, Modern Magic Stories, Nick Hall, Bruno Batista, Bobby Angus, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Phil Nall, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Shipper, Paul McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fabian, Kat McKenzie, Greg Rutka, Adam Highfield, Nicholas Gardner, Andrew Corrigan, Fiona Staples, Chris Halloran, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.